Hey guys, as you may have guessed, today we're going to be talking about logic and mocking Christians. But before we jump into that, I want to make sure we all understand what this fallacy called post hoc ergo propter hoc means. Now I know that's Latin, so it sounds like it'd be difficult, but it's really not that bad. In English, it means after this, therefore because of this. Or more simply put, correlation does not equal causation. Here's a quick example of it. In the UK, they have less crime than in the United States, and they also drink more tea than Americans. Now, I suspect all of you would be able to realize that it's not drinking more tea which causes the crime rate to be lower. So we can observe the correlation, that they both have less crime and drink more tea, but observing correlation doesn't prove causation. So just keep that in mind as we watch this next clip.
I live in a society where 8 out of 10 people believe in fairy tales, and it affects my life. Can you imagine what a society where 8 out of every 10 people believe in fairy tales like they're true would be like? It would be a society where we have trillions of dollars to spend on our war machine, yet we close down our children's school for lack of funding. It would be a society where we have millions and millions of empty houses, yet we won't let anybody live in them because they can't afford it, because they're not worthy of living in those houses. We hate our fellow human beings so much that we would rather these houses be empty than have people live in them that can't afford it. This is what a Christian nation brings you. How f***ed up can you get? And these are only a few minor examples of the very, very long list of f***ed up things this Christian society has brought us.
That's a perfect example of the fallacy post hoc ergo propter hoc. He's no closer to proving that tea reduces crime than he is to proving that Christianity causes any of those things. It could be that people are unable to afford to live in empty houses for factors completely unrelated to Christianity, like say capitalism for instance. Let's see what else he argues.
It is very easy to teach them new fairy tales and get them to believe in those fairy tales like their reality. You know, fairy tales like patriotism and consumerism and celebrity worship and politics. Christianity is like the gateway drug of fairy tales.
That's a good example of what's called the slippery slope fallacy. If A happens, then that will cause B, C, and D to happen. Or in this case, if you become a Christian, then that will cause you to believe fairy tales like patriotism, consumerism, celebrity worship, and politics. Now the first problem is that he provides no evidence of causation. And secondly, it's really easy to provide evidence against causation. One of the most obvious examples would be that I'm a Christian and that you're not going to see me engaging in something like celebrity worship. But let's look at patriotism. Christianity has 2 major rules, and one of those rules is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now patriotism is not a bad thing unless you violate love your neighbor as yourself. It only becomes detrimental when you think of your country as having special rights, or you think of your leader as being infallible. You even go so far as to say,
if you go ask any Christian if they're a Christian first or an American first, every one of them would tell you they're a Christian first.
So much for Christianity causing patriotism. The next fairy tale you mentioned is consumerism. Now the Bible talks about the love of money being the root of all evil. So if there is any kind of causal relationship going on here, then it seems like it'd be more likely that American culture taints Christian principles rather than Christian ideals, making Americans turn towards consumerism. Celebrity worship almost isn't worth bringing up. The Bible takes a really clear stance on any form of idolatry. And lastly, politics. I'm really not sure where you were going on this one. Politics isn't a fairy tale. Let's see what else you have to say.
In fact, Christians are specifically taught that faith is something to be respected, that believing in things without evidence is a feature to be admired. They actually take pride in their ignorance.
I understand when atheists misuse the term faith, but since you claim to be a former Christian, it kind of surprises me when you do it. Faith comes from the Greek word pistis, which means trust. And as you know, trust can be based on good reasoning or bad reasoning. The evidence is all important as to whether or not trust is a good thing or not. So the question becomes, what kind of trust does the Bible support? And with verses that say things like, test everything, hold on to the good, I think that answer is fairly obvious. Anyway, if you want to debate about faith, I'll put a link to my video on the topic in the more info section.
And I've tried everything I can think of to reach Christians. I've tried to present the evidence and have reasoned, logical debate with them.
In all honesty, was what you said earlier an attempt at reasoned, logical debate? It seemed more like an angry rant where you were willing to accept fallacious reasoning simply because it falls in line with your conclusion.
I've moved to the only method I found that works. Mocking.
So, the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy didn't work, and the slippery slope fallacy didn't work, and now you're moving on to a fallacy called an appeal to ridicule. That makes it kind of ironic when you end your video by saying,
Logic.
If you want this video to be seen or critiqued by more people, then be sure to click the like button. And as always, test everything, hold on to the good.